You push open the oak door, and the scent of dust and iron ink greets you first. The library is asleep, its shelves rising like cliffs in the dim half-light. Your fingers are cold, your breath leaving small ghosts in the air. You move deeper until the world narrows to a single desk, a single volume waiting there beneath a circle of yellowed lamplight. Its calfskin cover is the color of forgotten parchment, rough beneath your fingertips, soft at the edges as if once handled by monks or magicians. The clasp resists you, as though the book has learned the art of self-defense. It opens with a sigh that sounds almost human. The pages tremble. There is no Latin here, no Greek, only curling lines that look like vines reaching for the margins. The ink is a dark green that gleams when the light shifts, as if alive. You lean closer, and the smell hits you: animal hide, old oil, and something faintly sweet, like dried herbs crushed under heat. Every symbol moves with intention, but none belong to any tongue you know. They coil around drawings of plants that could never exist, roots twisted into spirals, leaves shaped like stars. You turn a page and find women drawn in watery blues, their bodies half submerged in green pools. Their eyes are blank, their mouths small and still, and thin lines connect them to orbs in the sky. They look neither sacred nor sinful, only certain of something you cannot name. The script beside them hums with rhythm, as if reciting a prayer you are not meant to hear. Behind you, the air shifts. The old lamp flickers, and for a breath, you feel watched, not by the past, but by the parchment itself. You imagine the hand that wrote these marks, steady, deliberate, perhaps fearful. Outside, a bell tolls somewhere in the city, its echo threading through the silence like a warning. You glance again at the first page. The ink appears darker now, thicker. The letters rearrange themselves when you blink. You whisper the shapes under your breath, trying to give them sound, and the sound that comes is wrong, too fluid, too alive. Something in the room seems to answer back. You close the book, but its pulse stays in your fingertips. 6 centuries have waited for someone to understand it, and now it waits for you. It does not want to be read. It wants to remember you. In the early years of the 20th century, amid the slow crumble of Europe's old empires, a man named Wilfrid Voynich walked through the echoing halls of Villa Mondragone. The Jesuit estate lay in the hills near Rome, its corridors heavy with incense and memory. Voynich was a book dealer, a hunter of rare manuscripts, a man who believed that forgotten pages could outlive their authors. He had a habit of pausing before every locked cabinet, his fingertips twitching as though he could sense history breathing inside. In one narrow room lined with chests of vellum-bound works, he found it. The chest was old, iron-bound, and half-buried beneath stacks of neglected tomes. When he lifted the lid, the smell of age and parchment rolled out like smoke. Inside was a single volume wrapped in faded cloth, lighter than he expected, but colder, as though it had been sleeping in shadow for centuries. The spine was bare, no title, no name, no clue. He carried it to the light, and when he opened it, the air itself seemed to change. The script inside was unlike any alphabet known to him, filled with looped symbols and graceful shapes that felt deliberate, even elegant. Beside them, painted in muted greens and blues, were illustrations of plants he could not name. Each page seemed to breathe, as if it contained motion caught in mid-thought. Voynich was not an ordinary collector. He had survived exile from Poland, studied chemistry, and lived by intellect sharper than most. But this book unnerved him. It resisted the logic of classification. He sent samples to colleagues in Rome, Florence, and London, men who could decipher Latin curses and Arabic treatises without pause. Yet none could identify a single letter. Whispers began to spread among scholars. Some said the script was Greek written backward. Others claimed it was an early form of shorthand or a cipher used by secret societies of the Renaissance. A few insisted it must be a forgery, though the pigments and parchment were undeniably medieval. Voynich himself dared to hope it was the lost work of Roger Bacon, the 13th century friar who had dreamt of machines that could fly and speak. If so, it would be worth more than gold. But as days turned to weeks, excitement gave way to quiet obsession. Each night he returned to the pages, certain he was on the verge of understanding, yet the letters refused to yield. The more he studied, the more alive the writing seemed. In the dim light of his study, Wilfrid Voynich realized he had not discovered a book. The book had discovered him. The manuscript rests under glass now, but even through the barrier you can feel its weight. 240 pages of calfskin parchment, the surface uneven and faintly translucent. Each page bears the faint veins of the animal it once was, as if the life it carried still hums beneath the ink. The letters flow in neat, disciplined lines. There are no corrections, no smudges, no hesitation. Whoever wrote it did so with unwavering confidence, as though they already understood a language no one else would ever learn. The pigments are older than memory. Verdigris green from copper, ochre from earth, a hint of lapis ground into powder so fine it still gleams under the light. The script winds between drawings that defy the botany of any known world. Some plants twist like sea creatures, their roots forming spirals that resemble organs. Others bloom into impossible geometry, stems coiling into shapes that suggest both anatomy and machinery. Every image feels familiar yet wrong, as if nature itself had been rewritten in a dialect of dreams. Turn a few pages, and the plants give way to stars. Concentric circles filled with suns, moons, and zodiacal beasts, all painted with care yet detached from our celestial maps. The constellations refuse to align with the heavens we know. Instead, they form their own private sky, perhaps the one imagined by an alchemist who believed the stars governed the humours of the body. Between these cosmic wheels appear clusters of nude women drawn in soft lines, immersed in emerald pools, connected by pipes that twist like blood vessels. Their faces are calm, almost holy. Their bodies flow into one another as if merging through liquid and time. Scholars have divided these images into sections: botanical, astronomical, biological, cosmological, pharmaceutical. The precision suggests a mind both methodical and visionary, yet no clear purpose emerges. The book resembles a scientific compendium created by someone who studied a parallel version of reality. Even the binding tells a story. The vellum was trimmed unevenly, the folios stitched with a thread that has darkened to the colour of old honey. The absence of a title hints at secrecy, or perhaps at humility. Whatever its intent, it is not random. Every symbol, every brushstroke, every fold of parchment was placed with care. This is not the work of a madman's scrawl, it is the voice of design. When you stare long enough, the letters begin to ripple. Your reflection bends in the glass above them, merging past and present into one silent conversation. The more you observe, the more it feels alive, like something breathing through centuries, waiting for the next mind, willing to listen. It is a book, yes, but it behaves like a heart. The script glides across the page like the echo of a forgotten voice. Each word curls and loops in patterns so precise that linguists can measure their rhythm, yet no one can tell what they mean. It moves from left to right, flowing with the calm of Latin but built from letters no one has ever seen before. There are no corrections, no hesitation marks, no stumbles of the pen. Whoever wrote it did so fluently, as if guided by a grammar that existed only in their mind. In the early decades of the 20th century, Voynich sent copies of the pages to the brightest codebreakers in Europe and America. Cryptographers who had broken military ciphers and diplomatic codes studied the text for months. They counted frequencies, analyzed repetitions, searched for symmetry. What they found defied both logic and randomness. The script followed rules. Certain characters appeared together, others never did. It had structure, the hallmark of real language. But no pattern matched any known alphabet or cipher. It was like listening to someone speak with perfect rhythm and no sound. During the Second World War, the manuscript drew the attention of the same minds who cracked enemy transmissions. At Bletchley Park, British and Polish experts in cryptanalysis examined photographs of the pages. They too failed. One analyst remarked that the text behaved like meaning itself, stripped of definition, as if the author had built a language designed to resist understanding. Decades later, computers joined the chase. In the late 20th century, programs built to analyze natural language processing ran through the Voynich script. They compared it to hundreds of known languages, ancient and modern. They found similarities in spacing, repetition, and rhythm, yet not a single recognizable word. When artificial intelligence entered the field in the 21st century, the algorithms reached the same conclusion. It behaves like language, but it is not one. Some claimed the text was written in cipher, an encryption so advanced it outlived the key. Others believed it was glossolalia, a stream of invented symbols created by a mind caught between worlds. A few proposed that it might record an extinct tongue spoken by a people who left no trace beyond this single book. Every theory adds to its legend, none bring clarity. Even the silence between words feels intentional. When you stare at the lines long enough, your eyes begin to follow the rhythm rather than the meaning, and for a moment you almost understand it. It feels alive, like something that is aware of being studied. For 600 years, it has spoken in a language that belongs to no one, and yet, somehow, it keeps speaking still. Every generation meets the manuscript and believes it can be the one to unlock it. The faces change, the tools evolve, but the hunger remains the same. Historians, linguists, mystics, and dreamers line up at its edge like pilgrims before a silent god. Each brings a theory, and each theory becomes another chapter in the story of human obsession. In the early decades after Voynich's discovery, scholars imagined it as a medieval herbal manual, a codex of lost remedies. The drawings of plants seemed to promise cures for every ailment, but the plants were strangers, hybrids of species that never grew on Earth. The theories shifted toward alchemy. Perhaps it was a book of transmutation, they said, where the plants represented elements, the stars, the soul's alignment with the cosmos. Others insisted it was a guide for women's health, the strange images of bathing figures interpreted as instructions for fertility, birth, or rejuvenation. When these ideas faltered, new ones rose. Some claimed it was a hoax created in the Renaissance to trick a gullible noble into paying for secrets that did not exist. Yet those who examined the parchment under microscopes found no sign of forgery. The ink was genuine, the pigments consistent with the early 15th century. To fake such precision would have required knowledge centuries ahead of its time. A few of the most brilliant minds succumbed to obsession. A British cryptographer once spent decades attempting to decode it, filling entire rooms with charts, translation tables, and linguistic experiments. He died with the conviction that he was close, only a few pages away from understanding, though his notebooks reveal no progress at all. Others, more imaginative than careful, declared victory. Each claimed to have solved the riddle. Each fell apart under scrutiny. One said it was written in Hebrew, another in Latin shorthand, a third in an invented Proto-Romance dialect. The manuscript remains silent, patient, and unchanged. Psychologists have studied the scholars themselves. They note how the mind craves closure, how chaos provokes invention. The Voynich manuscript became not a puzzle but a mirror, reflecting every interpreter's inner world. To some it spoke of medicine, to others of magic, to still others of deceit. It gave them whatever meaning they were desperate enough to find. And through it all the pages endure. The ink does not fade, the symbols do not break their order, and the silence grows louder with every failed translation. Each theory begins as discovery and ends as confession. It is not the manuscript that changes. It is the people who read it. To understand the manuscript, one must first return to the world that may have birthed it. Europe in the 15th century was a continent suspended between superstition and discovery. Alchemists filled their laboratories with copper fumes and prayers, trying to distill gold from decay. Physicians studied the stars to diagnose illness. Every pursuit of knowledge was a negotiation between faith and heresy. It was in this atmosphere that the Voynich Manuscript might have taken shape, not as an enigma but as a private experiment in preserving forbidden knowledge. The plants painted in its pages could represent the philosopher's garden, where every root mirrored a human organ and every leaf reflected a celestial body. The women bathing in coloured pools may not be literal at all, but symbols of transformation, the washing away of mortal impurity to reveal something divine. Some scholars have traced its trail to Prague, where Emperor Rudolf II gathered a court of dreamers, inventors, and magi. His palace was known as the home of impossible pursuits. There, in vaulted chambers filled with astrolabes and glass flasks, men like John Dee and Edward Kelly once sought to speak the language of angels. Records from Rudolph's court even mention a mysterious manuscript purchased for a sum of gold so immense it scandalized the imperial treasurer. Many believe this was the very same book that would later vanish into the archives of the Jesuits, only to be rediscovered by Voynich centuries later. If the manuscript truly originated in that era, it may have been more than scholarship. It could have been protection. To write openly of chemistry or astronomy risked being accused of sorcery. Codes and ciphers were the armor of knowledge. A scholar who wanted to survive might have disguised truth as riddle. Every looping character might be both formula and prayer. Every page a veil hiding what could not safely be spoken. Others suggest it was written for an audience beyond the church and the crown, for those few who believed that language itself could shape the natural world. Alchemy was not only about gold, but about translation, turning the invisible into the tangible, the divine into the human. In that sense, the Voynich Manuscript might be the ultimate act of alchemy, a book that turned knowledge into mystery and mystery into immortality. Perhaps the author succeeded. 600 years later, the gold of meaning still refuses to separate from the lead of confusion. It is the philosopher's stone of language, forever untransmuted. Not everyone kneels before mystery. For every believer who calls the Voynich Manuscript a relic of hidden wisdom, there is a skeptic who calls it a trick, an exquisite deception born from human vanity. They argue that the manuscript is not a code, not a language, not even a message. It is a ghost built from ink and imagination. The most persistent theory claims it was forged in the late Middle Ages, a time when the hunger for rare knowledge could make or break fortunes. Wealthy patrons, especially men like Emperor Rudolf II, paid handsomely for ancient wisdom, no matter how implausible. A clever scribe could earn a lifetime of comfort by producing something so strange that no scholar could contradict it. The Voynich Manuscript, they say, might have been a performance, a medieval illusion meant to imitate genius. But the illusion, if it is one, is remarkably disciplined. Linguists who have studied the text with mathematical precision find that its structure is too consistent to be random. The word patterns mimic natural language distribution, obeying rules no forger of the 15th century could have known. Even the curvature of letters repeats with mechanical precision, as though guided by a script that obeys invisible grammar. To sustain such order for hundreds of pages would demand obsession beyond ordinary deceit. Another theory holds that the manuscript is meaningless art, the medieval equivalent of automatic writing, created not for deception but for self-expression, a kind of trance writing. The author, they say, could have invented symbols for the sheer pleasure of creation, filling the pages as a monk fills silence with prayer. In this view, the book is not a riddle to be solved, but an artifact of the mind's need to speak, even when no one listens. Yet the skeptics, too, reveal their longing. They speak of randomness and coincidence, but their eyes linger on the pages longer than they admit. They search for repetition, for the hidden flaw that will unmask the illusion. None find it. The manuscript continues to defy both believer and doubter, refusing to settle into truth or trickery. Perhaps skepticism itself becomes a form of worship. To declare it meaningless is to acknowledge its power to haunt meaning. The skeptic may close the book with a shake of the head, but something remains behind a doubt, a tremor, the faint realization that the most convincing deceptions are those that never break character. Maybe it was a hoax. Maybe it was art. Maybe the difference no longer matters. Because even disbelief cannot stop the book from being alive. 6 centuries after its creation, the manuscript lives behind glass in the Voynich Rare Book and Manuscript Library at Yale University. The room is hushed, the air cooled and filtered. Visitors lean over the display with the same reverence once reserved for relics. Each page, scanned in perfect detail, glows on screens across the world. The world of secrets has become public, yet the secret itself remains untouched. When digital images were first released, scholars and hobbyists flooded the internet with theories. Forums, universities, and late-night chat rooms filled with arguments about syntax, medieval pigments, and the psychology of codemaking. Amateur linguists built programs to test every possible translation, running thousands of simulations that produced fragments of gibberish and accidental poetry. Each time someone declared victory, others quickly disproved it. The pattern never broke. The manuscript absorbed every hypothesis like sand swallowing water. In the late 20th century, a Canadian cryptographer suggested that it was written in a natural language with the vowels removed. Another researcher believed it was an elaborate shorthand used by an apothecary to disguise his trade secrets. In the 21st century, artificial intelligence was brought into the hunt. Neural networks compared the text to hundreds of languages, from Sanskrit to Old Cornish. The algorithms concluded what human minds had already suspected. The structure was real. The meaning was missing. A few moments of excitement pierced the monotony. A historian in Britain once claimed he had decoded it as a manual on women's health, written in a lost form of medieval shorthand Latin. For a week, headlines shouted that the riddle had been solved. Then linguists examined his work and found coincidence, not evidence. The code remained intact, indifferent to the noise surrounding it. Even modern technology cannot pierce its silence. Carbon dating of the vellum places it in the early 15th century. Yet the ink seems fresher, the handwriting too modern for its age. Some suggest the parchment was old stock reused by a later hand. Others think the dates confirm authenticity. Science provides data, but not story. The book keeps its own timeline, immune to verification. Every era tries to claim it. The scholars of Prague, the Jesuits of Rome, the codebreakers of war, the programmers of Silicon. Each generation approaches it with new faith and new tools. And each leaves with the same confession. The words are still unreadable. The silence still precise. The world has changed beyond recognition. The book has not. It endures like a heartbeat that refuses translation. The Voynich Manuscript is no longer just a book. It has become a reflection of everything humanity desires and dreads about knowledge itself. We have built telescopes to read the stars and machines to map the mind, yet this single parchment volume continues to remind us of our limits. It stands like a monument to the edge of comprehension, whispering that not all things made by human hands are meant for human understanding. For some, it symbolizes the arrogance of intellect, the belief that every mystery can be solved if we only apply enough logic, patience, or power. Generations of scholars, priests, and scientists have treated it like a locked door that must open, yet each century ends with the same sound: silence. The manuscript does not yield because it does not need to. Its existence is enough. It thrives not by being understood, but by being pursued. Others see it as a sacred relic of human creativity, proof that imagination can outlive purpose. Perhaps the author never intended to be read. Perhaps they wrote only to preserve the shape of thought, to capture an idea that could not exist in any known language. If so, the book is a triumph, a work that transcends communication and becomes pure expression. A song written for no ear, a map drawn to no place. Philosophers have compared it to the Tower of Babel humanity, reaching upward until language collapses under its own ambition. The Voynich Manuscript may be our modern Babel, a story of our reach exceeding our grasp. We cannot translate it because we are inside it, bound by the same limits that the author tried to escape. Every codebreaker, every historian, every curious mind becomes a character within its unfolding myth. The manuscript also mirrors the paradox of the Middle Ages. It belongs to a time when knowledge and belief were indistinguishable, when alchemy was science and prayer was experiment. Its survival into our rational age forces us to confront what we lost, the ability to wonder without demanding proof. Perhaps the real mystery is not the text itself, but the shift in our hearts that made us forget how to live with mystery. Even in its silence, the manuscript speaks. It tells us that knowledge is not possession but pilgrimage. Every attempt to translate it becomes an act of faith, a confession of our need to understand. The Voynich Manuscript is not just unreadable, it is eternal precisely because it remains so. The world keeps turning, our languages keep evolving, and the book waits, patient, unbroken, its meaning preserved in the space between knowing and wonder. You stand before it again, the same desk, the same dim light. 600 years have passed since it was written, yet its ink looks freshly laid. The letters shimmer faintly under the lamp, their loops and hooks arranged like constellations that obey a sky only they can see. You reach out but stop short of touching the glass. The air feels charged, as though the parchment beneath it is not ancient at all, but alive, aware of your presence. You imagine the hand that wrote these lines, steady, practiced, fearless. Perhaps it belonged to a monk in some hidden monastery, or an alchemist cloaked in candle smoke, or a woman whose name was erased before it was ever recorded. Whoever they were, they must have known this would outlive them. Each symbol curves with purpose, like the trace of a secret spoken into matter. The library around you hums softly. Distant footsteps echo through the stone corridors. Somewhere beyond the walls, a century of scholars and skeptics murmurs in unison, their theories dissolving into the same unbroken question: what is this language that no one speaks, yet everyone feels? You bend closer. The script draws your eyes in like a current. For a moment, your mind begins to adjust to its rhythm. The letters seem almost to form sound, to pulse like a heart beating beneath the page. You think of all the minds that have tried to cross this boundary, kings, priests, spies, scientists, and how each left their fingerprints here, invisible but eternal. The longer you look, the more the book looks back. It holds you in its quiet, patient gaze, neither inviting nor denying, only existing. You realize that every attempt to solve it was not a failure, but a ritual. To open the Voynich Manuscript is to enter a contract with mystery. You offer curiosity, it returns silence. And in that silence, something vast moves the recognition that understanding is not the highest form of knowing. Sometimes, wonder is. You take a breath and close your eyes. The pages fade behind your lids like after-images of stars. When you open them again, the world feels slightly altered, as if a new language is trying to form behind the familiar one you speak. The book remains on the table, unchanged, yet you leave with the uneasy sense that it has learned something about you. The Voynich Manuscript does not wait for translation. It waits for remembrance. Night settles over the library. The glass case glows faintly in the low light, a shrine for a language that no one can read. The visitors are gone. Only the hum of the air and the soft ticking of the clock remain. The book sleeps, yet its presence fills the room like breath. 6 centuries have passed since the first hand drew its strange alphabet, and still it waits, untouched by comprehension. Somewhere in the world, a student scrolls through a digital facsimile, eyes widening in the blue glow of a screen. Another researcher maps its symbols into graphs, believing the pattern will finally yield meaning. And yet, every translation fades before the ink dries. Every answer turns back into question. The manuscript endures, not as a puzzle, but as a mirror. It reflects our unbroken habit of reaching beyond the limits of our own mind. It has outlived the monarchs who hoarded it, the monks who guarded it, the scholars who feared it, and the machines that tried to decode it. Its mystery is not a flaw, it is its perfection. In a world that dissects everything, it alone resists dissection. Perhaps that is its quiet mercy, to remind us that the unknown is not the enemy of knowledge, but its heartbeat. That wonder is a kind of wisdom too. As the light dims, the ink seems to darken, drawing its own shadows. You watch for a moment longer, then turn away. Behind you, the manuscript remains open to a page no one has yet translated. The letters rest in silence, arranged in meaning only the author would have known. The world outside continues to move, its languages multiplying, its voices rising. But here, within the hush of parchment and time, one voice stays unbroken. It speaks in silence. And silence, it seems, never grows old.